The 30th of January, 1933, Germany. Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi Party, is appointed Chancellor of Germany by the German President, Paul von Hindenburg. The Nazi regime quickly begins to restrict the civil and human rights of the Jews and opens the first concentration camp, Dachau, situated near Munich. Between 1933 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its European allies would establish more than 44,000 camps and other incarceration sites, including ghettos. The perpetrators would use these locations for forced labor, detention of people deemed to be enemies of the state, and the mass murder of millions. Among the members of this criminal Nazi regime are the former German nobles who believed that Hitler would restore their abolished monarchies, and with it, their lost inheritances. One of them is Josias, hereditary Prince of Waldeck and Pyrmont. Josias, Prince of Waldeck and Pyrmont, was born on the 13th of May, 1896, at the ruling family's castle in Arolsen, then part of the German Empire. He was the eldest son and heir of Prince Friedrich, the last ruler of Principality of Waldeck and Pyrmont, which was a constituent state of the German Empire, and Princess Bathildis. Josias was also the cousin of the Dutch Queen Wilhelmina, who reigned from 1890 until her abdication in 1948. The First World War began on the 28th of July, 1914. Waldeck enlisted in the German army as a cadet of the infantry regiment and suffered serious injuries after being wounded in action multiple times. The First World War ended on the 11th of November, 1918, when the German leaders signed the armistice in the Compiègne forest in France. The introduction of new weapons like the machine gun and gas warfare led to enormous losses, and the war claimed the lives of over 10 million soldiers. Property and industry losses were catastrophic. As a result, the victorious powers imposed a series of treaties upon the defeated powers. Among the treaties, the 1919 Treaty of Versailles held Germany responsible for starting the war and liable for massive material damages. The treaty imposed harsh penalties on the Germans, including the loss of 13% of its pre-war territories, extensive reparation payments, and the demilitarization of the Rhineland. The Reichswehr, the German army, was restricted to 100,000 men. Following Kaiser Wilhelm II's abdication in November 1918 and the German Revolution, all German nobility as a legally defined class was abolished. On promulgation of the Weimar Constitution on the 11th of September 1919, all members of the German nobility who until the German Revolution of 1918 had enjoyed legal status and privileges that separated them from the rest of society were declared equal before the law. Josias's family lost their Principality of Waldeck and Pyrmont, as it became the Free State of Waldeck-Pyrmont within the Weimar Republic, which was the government of Germany from 1918 to 1933. In 1919, Josias Waldeck was discharged from the army and fought as a Freikorps officer in Upper Silesia. In the aftermath of World War I and during the German Revolution of 1918 to 1919, Freikorps, consisting largely of World War I veterans, were raised as paramilitary militias. They were ostensibly mustered to fight on behalf of the government against the communists attempting to overthrow the Weimar Republic. However, many Freikorps also largely despised the new Weimar Republic and were involved in assassinations of its supporters. Between 1921 and 1923, Josias studied agriculture, economics, and law in Munich without graduating. On the 25th of August 1922, he married Duchess Altberg of Oldenburg, and they had 5 children. Beginning in 1925, some members of higher levels of the German nobility joined the Nazi Party. Following Kaiser Wilhelm II's abdication, there were kings, grand dukes, dukes and princes, who along with all of their heirs, successors and families, lost their titles and domains, and they wanted them back. Hitler, Goering, Himmler, and other Nazi leaders frequently appealed to these former nobles by expressing sympathy for a restoration of their abolished monarchies, and with it, their lost inheritances. As a result, many aristocrats were early Nazi Party supporters, but they fatally misjudged the Führer. One such aristocrat was Josias, Prince of Waldeck and Pyrmont. On the 1st of November 1929, he joined the Nazi Party, and in March 1930, he joined the SS. He was immediately appointed adjutant to Sepp Dietrich, a leading member of the SS, before becoming Heinrich Himmler's adjutant and staff chief in September 1930. This enabled Waldeck to rise rapidly in the SS hierarchy. At the end of 1931, the anti-Nazi press reported that Hitler had put Waldeck in charge of setting up the SS intelligence service. In 1932, Waldeck became an SS group leader. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came into power in January 1933, and Josias was elected as a member of the Reichstag, the German parliament. The same year, he was promoted to the rank of SS Lieutenant General. In 1934, Waldeck participated in the Night of the Long Knives, which was the murder of the leadership of the SA, the Stormtroopers, which was the Nazi paramilitary formation led by Ernst Röhm, a longtime friend of Adolf Hitler. Hitler, pressured by German army commanders, whose support he would need to become the president, directed the SS, led by Heinrich Himmler, to murder the SA Chief of Staff Ernst Röhm and his top commanders. The murders took place between the 30th of June and the 2nd of July, 1934. And the SS also murdered several conservative critics of the Nazi regime, including Hitler's predecessor as Chancellor, General Kurt von Schleicher. At Hitler's request, the German parliament declared the killings legal, after the fact based on a false accusation that Röhm and his commanders had planned to overthrow the government. This purge demonstrated the Nazi regime's willingness to go outside of the law to commit murder as an act of state for the perceived survival of the nation. On the 1st of August 1934, one day before President Hindenburg's death, Hitler's cabinet passed the Law Concerning the Highest State Office of the Reich, which stipulated that upon Hindenburg's death, the office of the President, Head of State, would be abolished and his powers merged with the Chancellor, Head of Government, under the title of Führer. On the 2nd of August 1934, 2 hours after Hindenburg's death, Hitler proclaimed himself the Führer of Germany and claimed absolute power. The onset of World War II, which began on the 1st of September 1939 when Germany invaded Poland, brought about accelerated persecution and deportation, and later mass murder to the Jews of Germany. 1 year before, in October 1938, Waldeck, who remained loyal to the Nazi regime until his very end, had been promoted again to the higher SS and police leader for Weimar. In this position, he had supervisory authority over Buchenwald concentration camp. Established in July 1937, Buchenwald was one of the largest concentration camps established within German borders. Prisoners lived in the Buchenwald main camp, which was surrounded by an electrified barbed wire fence, watchtowers, and a chain of sentries outfitted with automatic machine guns. At the entrance to the main camp, there was a notorious punishment block known as the bunker, where prisoners who violated the camp's regulations were punished and often tortured to death. In addition to the punishment block, the main camp included 33 wooden barracks, disinfection buildings, a brothel, and a crematorium. Most of the early inmates at Buchenwald were political prisoners, people who had been arrested for some form of political opposition to the Nazi regime. One of the camp's most prominent prisoners was a daughter of the Italian king, Princess Mafalda of Savoy. She was imprisoned in Buchenwald on the order of Adolf Hitler, who believed that Mafalda and her family were complicit in Mussolini's downfall. She bled to death at Buchenwald on the night of the 28th of August, 1944, at the age of 41. In addition to political prisoners and Jews, Buchenwald prisoners also included repeat offenders, Jehovah's Witnesses, Sinti and Roma people, and German military deserters. In 1941, when Buchenwald had first caught the attention of Josias Waldeck, the camp's commandant was Karl-Otto Koch. Waldeck, when glancing over the camp's death list, came across the name of Walter Kramer, a head hospital orderly at Buchenwald, whom Waldeck recognized because Kramer had successfully treated him in the past. Waldeck investigated the case and discovered that Karl-Otto Koch had ordered both Kramer and Karl Pikes, a hospital attendant, killed as political prisoners because they had treated him for syphilis, a fact that Koch had wished to keep a secret. Waldeck also received reports that a certain prisoner had been shot while attempting to escape. By that time, Koch had been transferred to the Majdanek concentration camp in German-occupied Poland, but his wife Ilse, who belonged to the Buchenwald personnel, was still living at the commandant's house in the camp. Waldeck ordered a full-scale investigation of the camp. It was discovered that the prisoner who had been shot while trying to escape had been told to get water from a well some distance from the camp, and was then shot from behind because he had also helped to treat Koch for syphilis. Throughout the investigation, more of Koch's orders to kill prisoners at the camp were revealed, as well as evidence of embezzlement of possessions stolen from the prisoners. When it was revealed that the Kochs had used the massive Nazi apparatus to gain an enormous amount of wealth, their downfall became inevitable, as all the possessions stolen from murdered Jews was regarded as the property of the Reich. While Ilse was acquitted for lack of evidence, Karl-Otto Koch was executed by firing squad on the 5th of April, 1945. Waldeck himself was then arrested by American forces on the 13th of April, 1945. In May the following year, while under arrest, his father Friedrich died. Josias thus became a head of the House of Waldeck and Pyrmont. Waldeck was then tried at the Buchenwald trial, which started on the 11th of April, 1947, and lasted 4 months. One of the defendants was Ilse Koch, who had already been investigated by Waldeck during the Nazi era. She became infamous for her sadistic and brutal treatment of the prisoners, and was accused by former inmates of taking souvenirs from the skin of murdered prisoners who had distinctive tattoos, as she was obsessed with this form of body art, as well as beating pregnant women with a whip which had been fitted with razor blades at the end. In the courtroom, Ilse Koch stated that she was 8 months pregnant, but for her crimes the tribunal sentenced her to life imprisonment. One of the charges against Waldeck was that he had ordered the execution of her husband, Karl-Otto Koch. The second was that he had been personally responsible for crimes at Buchenwald, since the camp was located in his jurisdictional area, even though he was never in command of it. On the 14th of August 1947, the US military tribunal sentenced Waldeck to life imprisonment. However, this sentence was reduced to 20 years, and in November 1950, after serving only 3 years, Waldeck was released from Landsberg prison for health reasons. In 1953, he was granted amnesty and spent the last years of his life in seclusion as a free man. Josias, Prince of Waldeck and Pyrmont, died at the age of 71 on the 30th of November 1967 at Schaumburg Castle. He was succeeded as head of the house by his only son, Prince Wittekind, who has been the head of the House of Waldeck and Pyrmont ever since, and today lives with his family at Arolsen Castle. Wittekind, now 86 years old, was born in 1936, and his 2 middle names are Adolf and Heinrich, which can be explained by the fact that his godfathers were Adolf Hitler and Heinrich Himmler. Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Please help us to create more videos by clicking on the donation link. Thank you, and see you next time on the channel.